25 smart 1950s. Cooking tricks. Every housewife knew, but we forgot. Do you feel that cooking is becoming increasingly expensive and time-consuming? Last century, housewives solved these challenges with brilliant ingenuity. They didn't need expensive apps or equipment. They knew how to make whipped cream from evaporated milk, or turn potato chip crumbs into a crispy casserole topping. Today, we will uncover all the clever kitchen secrets that help them save money and time, but which we have forgotten. Whipped evaporated milk cream. Real whipped cream was truly a luxury that many families could not afford regularly. Fresh cream spoiled easily, was expensive, and wasn't always easy to find at the corner store. But the clever housewives of that era discovered an excellent substitute: canned evaporated milk. Evaporated milk could sit on the shelf for months, but when handled correctly, it could provide the richness and fluffiness that desserts required. The secret to this technique lay in extreme chilling. The can of evaporated milk had to be chilled overnight in the refrigerator to ensure optimal temperature. Some careful women even chilled the mixing bowl and whisk attachments in the freezer before beginning the work. When the cold evaporated milk was poured out and whipped with a hand mixer, it created surprisingly stable, fluffy peaks that held their shape well on pies and puddings. Whipped evaporated milk cream is not as rich as fresh cream, but its stability is higher, making it the perfect topping for cold icebox treats. To help the cream stabilize further and achieve a pleasant slight tang, some people also added a tablespoon of lemon juice or a pinch of cream of tartar while whipping. Bacon grease jar. In the kitchen, the repurposed ceramic crock or coffee can placed next to the stove was not a sign of clutter. They called it liquid gold. Bacon grease was leftover fat that was repurposed into a unique, valuable, and versatile seasoning, accumulated after every breakfast. Clever housewives would never pour this glistening liquid down the drain. Instead, they filtered the hot rendered fat through cheesecloth to remove all the crumbs and create clean fat used for seasoning and cooking countless dishes. This grease would solidify when cooled and could be safely stored for weeks at room temperature without refrigeration, making it a reliable fat source during times of ingredient rationing or when commercial cooking oils were scarce. Bacon grease became the secret weapon in the kitchen. A small spoon could add a wonderful flavor when frying eggs. More importantly, it helped turn green beans into a vegetable that children wanted to eat, or created a crispy, savory crust for cornbread and biscuits. It transformed bland boiled vegetables into rich dishes. Housewives taught their daughters how to safely pour the grease and how to use it, passing it down through generations. Seeing that grease jar on the stove was a sign that the home was well cared for and that cooking was taken seriously, emphasizing flavor. Meatloaf panade trick. Meatloaf was a staple dish in the 1950s, but ensuring the meat was moist and smooth rather than dry and crumbly was a challenge for many housewives. The secret came from a classic French culinary technique called panade, which means bread soaked in liquid. Panade became an ingenious saving solution. During tight economic times or when meat was expensive, soaking stale bread, usually 2 slices of white bread and half a cup of milk or water, and mixing it into the ground meat helped stretch the meat portion. Just 2 slices of milk-soaked bread could help stretch 1 pound of ground beef to feed 6 people. Even more surprisingly, panade had an amazing chemical effect. When the bread was softened, it acted like a sponge absorbing moisture, and when baked, it slowly released that moisture back into the meat. This prevented the meatloaf from becoming dense, dry, or crumbly in the oven. The result was a soft meatloaf, perfectly holding its shape and having a more pleasant texture. Evaporated milk icebox treats. The secret to using evaporated milk in these treats was chilling it to a slushy, nearly frozen state. Canned evaporated milk became a silent foundation for dessert creativity in the 1950s. It was a perfect substitute for fresh cream and raw eggs in cold, no-bake desserts, or those not requiring an ice cream maker. Once the milk reached a consistency similar to thick slush, it would be whipped. Because evaporated milk has a much higher concentration of solids, protein, and fat than regular fresh milk, when whipped, it created a smooth, fluffy, mousse-like base. This creamy base was very light, held its shape well, and when frozen, had a smoother texture with less ice crystallization than fresh milk. This technique gave birth to many classic recipes, most famously the lemon icebox pie. The filling for this pie often used evaporated milk instead of raw eggs, ensuring safety and a smooth texture. Evaporated milk played the role of a silent hero. It allowed housewives to create icy, cold, and complex desserts without having to rely on large freezers, expensive ice cream makers, or worry about fresh ingredients spoiling quickly. Evaporated milk was always available in the pantry, providing assurance that even on the tightest budget days, dessert could still be served. Mayonnaise cake hack. It may sound strange, but mayonnaise was one of the best-kept secrets for creating the moistest chocolate cakes of the decade. This tip was more than just a flavor trick. It was best known only by your mother and grandmother. At a time when eggs and butter were frequently scarce or rationed, mayonnaise became a perfect substitute. Mayonnaise, which is an emulsion made from oil and eggs, provided fat, moisture, and eggs all in one addition. Creative bakers discovered that just 3/4 cup of mayonnaise could perfectly replace 3 eggs and half a cup of oil. The best part was that the fat and eggs in the mayonnaise not only added moisture but also helped the cake retain its softness and smooth texture. The acid from the vinegar in the mayonnaise also played an important chemical role. It helped activate the baking powder more powerfully, resulting in a higher rise. Simultaneously, a slight tang enhanced the chocolate flavor. Cakes made with mayonnaise had an incredibly good ability to retain moisture, staying fresh for days. By simply mixing a few spoonfuls of mayonnaise into store-bought cake mix, you could achieve a cake with a texture comparable to those made at high-end bakeries. Are you still with us on this nostalgic journey? Help us share more by hyping this video. Soup can casseroles. The 1950s was the era of convenience with Campbell's condensed cream soup, especially cream of mushroom soup. They became the miracle ingredient, the binder for the casserole dish. Casserole was a staple dish, usually made from leftover meat, leftover vegetables, and a creamy, fatty sauce. Previously, to create the creamy texture for a casserole, housewives had to make a white sauce from scratch, which involved cooking butter, flour, and milk, a process prone to lumps and time-consuming. Canned soup completely eliminated this step. Simply open a can of condensed cream soup, mix it with a little milk or broth, and you immediately had a thick, smooth, pre-seasoned sauce. The simplicity of this tip turned leftover chicken, canned tuna, or leftover vegetables into a hearty, creamy dinner. Housewives quickly realized that 1 can of soup mixed with milk or broth could bind 4 cups of ingredients. The flexibility of canned soup allowed them to easily change flavors to create countless casserole variations, catering to every taste. This technique saved a lot of time. It allowed busy housewives to meet the family's needs without having to spend hours in the kitchen. Pressure cooker pot roast. Before the slow cooker became popular, the pressure cooker was the supreme and essential tool for transforming tough, inexpensive cuts of meat into fall-apart tender meals in record time. This was the ultimate technology for saving time and budget. Pot roast typically used tougher cuts like beef shoulder, requiring long braising times, often 4 hours, for the connective tissues to break down and tenderize the meat. The pressure cooker completely changed this rule. For example, a 3-pound beef shoulder roast only needed 45 minutes under pressure to achieve perfect fork-tender softness. The magic of the pressure cooker lies in its scientific mechanism. The sealed environment in the pot retains steam, raising the temperature higher than the normal boiling point of water. This extremely high temperature rapidly breaks down the tough connective tissues, collagen, in the meat. This significantly shortens the cooking time, allowing housewives to fully utilize cheaper cuts of meat without worrying about toughness. The pressure cooker was a sign of modernization in the kitchen, enabling working or busy mothers to still serve a hearty, cozy dinner without being constrained by time. Instant pudding pies. This technique is an excellent example of how housewives maximized newly introduced convenience products to save effort while still serving appealing, elegant desserts. When Jell-O introduced instant pudding in the 1950s, housewives immediately found creative ways to use it as a shortcut for making pies. This tip helped create a fluffy, delicious pie filling in just minutes, ideal for unexpected dinners or when time was tight. The secret lay in adjusting the liquid ratio. Typically, instant pudding mix requires a specific amount of milk to set into pudding. However, to make pie filling, housewives slightly reduced the amount of milk, for example, using 1 cup of milk instead of 2. The reduced milk amount helped create a more perfect consistency, closer to a cream. They also often mixed in whipped cream or Cool Whip into this mixture to add fluffiness and lightness. This mixture was then poured into a pre-made pie crust, often a graham cracker crust. The magic was that this pie only needed 30 minutes of chilling in the freezer or refrigerator to fully set, turning it into a quick bakery-style dessert. Broiler quick grapefruit. Broiled grapefruit was an elegant, quick breakfast or dessert that emphasized presentation while remaining healthy. This was a small tip that made a big difference in flavor and texture. Grapefruit often has a sour taste and tough white membranes. To remedy this, smart housewives would cut the grapefruit in half, then sprinkle a layer of brown or regular sugar on top, and place a small pat of butter. The grapefruit was then placed under the broiler for about 3 minutes. The high, direct heat from the broiler melted the brown sugar and butter, creating a warm, bubbling caramelized crust right on the surface. This process not only mellowed the fruit's tartness, but also softened the grapefruit segments and white membranes, making them much easier to eat. This dish was served immediately, warm, mildly sweet, and buttery. It imparted a feeling of luxury, especially when served in special grapefruit bowls with serrated spoons, often found in middle-class families. Broiler quick grapefruit was the perfect blend of convenience, taking only minutes, and style, providing a fast, elegant, yet healthy breakfast. Among the modern kitchen tools you use, which one reminds you most of your mother's or grandmother's cooking work back then? Share your memory below. Sky-high meringue with cream of tartar. A failed meringue made from whipped egg whites is the pain of every baker. Meringue easily becomes watery, collapses, or doesn't hold its shape, especially in humid weather. The secret to creating sky-high meringue peaks that never weep or collapse is cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is an acid. Just 1/8 teaspoon per egg white is enough to make a big difference. This acid is added to the egg whites at the start of whipping. Chemically, it works by lowering the pH of the egg whites, allowing the egg proteins to bind more effectively and hold air better. Stabilizing this foam structure creates a smoother, shinier meringue, and most importantly, one with high moisture resistance. Instead of deflating or weeping while sitting, meringue enhanced with cream of tartar holds its perfect shape, creating a professional look for lemon pies or other desserts. This technique became an unwritten rule for housewives who wanted their meringue perfect, proving that a basic understanding of chemistry could be the most powerful tool in the kitchen. This tip improved texture, giving bakers complete confidence in their skill. Baking soda reduces bean cooking time. Cooking dried beans is a time-consuming project, often taking hours to soften the tough outer skins, requiring overnight soaking and prolonged boiling. For 1950s housewives who needed to get meals on the table quickly, this was a major challenge. Just 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda in the soaking or boiling water transformed bean cooking from an all-day job into a manageable meal. Chemically, baking soda creates an alkaline environment. This environment has the ability to soften the tough bean skins by breaking down the pectin in the bean cell walls. When the pectin is broken down, water can penetrate the beans faster, helping them cook evenly and tenderize much more quickly. This tip could reduce cooking time by almost half. For example, navy beans could be fully cooked in 90 minutes instead of 3 hours. This was especially crucial when beans were a main, inexpensive source of protein for large families. Besides saving time, another benefit of using baking soda is that it helps make beans more digestible, minimizing issues with bloating. It is truly admirable how housewives used folk chemistry knowledge to optimize their cooking efficiency, turning a difficult raw ingredient into a quick, nutritious meal. Looking back at these secrets, do you feel more admiration for your mother? Condensed soup as gravy. Utilizing condensed soup wasn't limited to casseroles. It was also the secret to creating instant gravy without lumps. Traditional gravy required precision when making the butter and flour roux, a step that 1950s housewives often wanted to avoid when a quick solution was needed. Condensed soup, such as cream of mushroom, became an excellent gravy base. It could be diluted with drippings from the roasting pan or simply by adding broth and a bit of seasoning. Specifically, cream of mushroom soup mixed with pan drippings and a splash of wine became a type of gravy for company, elegant enough to serve guests, yet taking only minutes to prepare. The greatest benefit of this tip lay in the consistency of the canned soup. The soup already contained balanced thickeners, completely eliminating the risk of lumpy gravy. This boosted the confidence of housewives who needed a quick, reliable solution to enrich meat, pasta, rice, or vegetables. Cream of chicken soup easily transformed into poultry gravy, and French onion soup could create a rich beef gravy. These cans of convenient shelf-stable savior food became a reliable tool in every cook's toolkit. Neutralizing tomato sauce with baking soda. Many tomato sauces, especially those made from canned tomatoes or garden tomatoes that weren't fully ripe, can taste too sour or too acidic. The natural reaction of many people is to add sugar to mask the sourness. However, there was a very clever 1950s approach, knowing that sugar only masks the sourness but doesn't actually neutralize it. The simplest solution was baking soda. Just a pinch, about 1/8 teaspoon of baking soda, added to overly acidic tomato sauce will create a gentle chemical reaction. The alkaline baking soda neutralizes the excess acid in the tomatoes. This neutralization reaction instantly changes the pH of the sauce. The result is a tomato flavor that is more balanced, smoother, and highlights the natural essence of the tomatoes without adding any excess sweetness. This technique was widely used when making spaghetti sauce, tomato soup, or any tomato-based stew. This is a small but powerful tip that enhances the flavor quality of main dishes without increasing cost or complicating the recipe. It demonstrates a deep understanding of how ingredients interact in the kitchen. Sift and mix dry goods. In cooking, especially baking, the texture of the finished product is paramount. The flour sifter was more than a utensil. It was an essential piece of equipment in the 1950s kitchen, responsible for creating light and tender baked goods. Housewives followed a strict protocol. Always sift the flour before measuring. There were two main purposes for this habit. First, sifting helped to remove lumps and aerate the flour. Lighter, airier flour created baked goods with a softer and lighter texture. Without sifting, cakes tended to be dense and heavy. Second, sifting was used to ensure even distribution of leavening agents. Housewives often sifted flour, baking powder, salt, and sometimes cocoa together. This ensured that the leavening agents were perfectly blended throughout the flour. If the baking powder was not evenly distributed, the cake might rise unevenly or worse, leave bitter spots in the final product. This sifting process became part of the baking ritual, guaranteeing consistency and quality, and was a sign of a meticulous and professional baker. Wax paper cake pan liners. Before parchment paper became common and easily accessible, wax paper was the primary choice to ensure cakes were removed from the pan perfectly. A cake sticking to the bottom of the pan was a disaster, and 1950s housewives had a simple yet effective method to prevent it. This technique required precision. The wax paper was cut to the size of the cake pan bottom. However, the secret wasn't just lining the pan. The wax paper needed to be greased on both sides. Greasing the bottom side helped the paper stick firmly to the pan base and prevented it from shifting when the batter was poured in. Greasing the top side ensured the cake crust would release easily after baking. Wax paper was also creatively reused in various other ways. The wax paper liner inside cereal bags after being cleaned was also repurposed to wrap sandwiches or line pans. Additionally, wax paper was used for rolling out pie dough. By placing the dough between two sheets of wax paper, it could be flattened without needing much flour on the countertop, preventing the dough from sticking and drying out, ensuring the pie crust was thin, even, and easily lifted into the pan without tearing. If you've ever used an effective tip from your mother's or grandmother's time to make sweets or bread, tell us about that family secret. Potato chip casserole crust. In the 1950s, finding a crispy topping for casserole dishes was a challenge because bread flour, expensive imported cheeses, and specialized breadcrumbs were not common. Housewives saw potential right in their pantries, in bags of stale, leftover, or discounted potato chips. This trick was a clever way to fully utilize potato chip bags that would otherwise be thrown away to create a wonderful texture. The golden ratio passed down in community cookbooks was 2 cups of crushed potato chips with 3 tablespoons of melted butter. The crushed chips provided a salty, fully seasoned flavor and a crunchy texture. This mixture was sprinkled evenly over the casserole, usually during the last 15 minutes of baking. When placed in the oven, the fat from the butter and the potato chips made this topping turn golden and crispy. This created a fantastic contrast with the creamy filling underneath, making otherwise simple casseroles more appealing, especially to children. There were even recipes that mixed potato chip crumbs with margarine or powdered cheese before baking to enhance the flavor. The potato chip crust was not an improvisation. It was a practical solution that delivered unexpected satisfaction and turned a humble dinner into a small feast. Savory Jell-O salads. Who doesn't know this dish? Molded gelatin salads, Jell-O salads, were an iconic food of the 1950s. The savory dessert salads were served as appetizers or side dishes on lettuce leaves. They represented the height of sophistication and presentation skill. This tip often used unflavored gelatin, Knox or savory gelatin, combined with unexpected ingredients like diced vegetables, celery, onions, mayonnaise, and sometimes seafood or ham. The gelatin was dissolved in broth or warm water. Then the ingredients were mixed in and poured into decorative molds. The appeal of this salad lay in the image of the ingredients suspended like jewels in the clear or brightly colored geol layer. It was a creative way to use leftovers and stretch a meal. The use of gelatin helped preserve food longer and made it look more appealing. For housewives, savory Jell-O salad allowed them to express creativity. It was resourceful thriftiness disguised with a bit of showmanship. This dish demonstrated that even with limited ingredient choices, housewives could bring color, texture, and freshness to the table. Pilot Light dough proofing. Successful bread making depends heavily on the dough proofing process at a warm and stable temperature. In the old gas ovens of the 1950s, the continuously burning Pilot Light was an unexpected yet perfect heat source. This Pilot Light generated a small, consistent amount of heat, about 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, 26 to 29 degrees Celsius, an ideal range for yeast fermentation and bread making. Housewives would place the bowl of dough covered with a clean towel into the turned-off oven, utilizing the warmth from the Pilot Light. This tip ensured that the dough would rise evenly, predictably in terms of time, and was unaffected by drafts or fluctuating kitchen temperatures. This technique stemmed from observation and the ability to fully utilize what was available. Before plastic wrap or modern proofing boxes, using a clean kitchen towel to cover the dough was part of the ritual. The towel kept the dough from drying out and protected it from dust, while allowing it to breathe, ensuring the rising process occurred correctly. This technique is a wonderful example of how the patience and rhythm of handcrafted cooking yielded results without the need for high-tech equipment. Coffee can brown bread. New England brown bread is a traditional dish with a dense, moist texture that is cooked by steaming, unlike typical baking. Traditionally, this dish required specialized steaming molds, but 1950s housewives, always looking for simplification and repurposing solutions, found a perfect tool: a clean 1-pound coffee can. The metal can, with its tall and sturdy cylindrical shape, acted as an excellent steaming mold. This shape also helped with ideal portion control and retained the bread's moisture longer. To perfect this dish, the brown bread batter mixture would be mixed into a thick dough. After pouring into the can was placed in a large pot containing about 1 inch of boiling water and covered tightly to steam for about 2 hours. The metal can conducted heat evenly, ensuring the bread was cooked evenly and moist throughout. The result was perfectly cylindrical loaves, ready to be sliced into regular servings. Some bakers even kept the plastic lids of the coffee cans to seal leftover slices of bread, helping the bread retain flavor and quality for days. Foil-lined broiler pans. One of the most strenuous and dreaded chores in the 1950s kitchen was scrubbing broiler pans after roasting meat, due to splattered grease and burnt residue on the metal surface. The simple act of lining the pan with heavy-duty aluminum foil revolutionized cleanup. The foil was crimped to fit the pan and the drip tray underneath, catching all the grease and food debris that splattered while broiling meat or cutlets. After cooking, housewives simply carefully peeled off the foil and discarded it, leaving the pan nearly clean. This technique gave precious minutes back to busy mothers who struggled with household chores. Fortunately, the benefits of foil didn't stop at cleanup. Foil also has heat-reflective properties. The shiny surface of the foil reflected heat back onto the food, helping the meat brown more evenly and quickly, especially when using the broiler. Some housewives even crimped the edges of the foil to create a tent over the food to prevent scorching or to collect valuable pan drippings for gravy. This technique was a clever combination of minimizing effort and maximizing cooking efficiency. Ice cube trays for broth. There was a clever, quiet way to turn leftovers into cooking ingredients. Ice cube trays in the 1950s had a much wider purpose than just making ice. Smart housewives used them to portion and preserve flavor. This tip was a brilliant and practical solution to avoid waste. When there were leftovers of homemade chicken stock, drippings from a roast, or a little sauce too good to pour away, they would pour them into ice cube trays. Once frozen, these small flavor cubes could be popped out and stored in airtight bags or containers. Weeks later, when flavor was needed for a stew, casserole, or sautéed vegetables, 1 or 2 frozen broth cubes were simply dropped into the pot. This technique kept weeknight meals from being bland and extended flavors when spices might have been scarce. It also helped prevent food spoilage without relying on bulky storage or taking up too much refrigerator space. Storing celery in aluminum foil. Keeping celery crisp was a top priority in the 1950s kitchens, especially before plastic wrap was common. When celery started to soften or wilt, it wasn't discarded. Instead, housewives used a simple trick to revive and preserve it, tightly wrapping the celery in aluminum foil. This technique acted as a clever wrapper. The foil allowed a small amount of moisture to escape. This was crucial because if wrapped in plastic bags, too much moisture would be retained, causing the celery to become mushy and spoil faster. By wrapping the celery in foil and placing it in the refrigerator, housewives could extend the crispness and freshness of the bunch up to nearly 2 weeks. This technique ensured that side dishes or salads always had a pleasant crunch. This tip was passed down as family wisdom, proving that even when food was money, resourcefulness helped prevent waste and saved money over time. This tip was unassuming but very effective, showing that foil was a versatile and reliable tool. Stretching ground beef with oats/peanut butter. Ground beef was an expensive ingredient, and during times of rationing or tight budgets, stretching the meat portion was necessary. 1950s housewives used many creative fillers to achieve this goal. Rolled oats were a popular choice. They were mixed into the ground beef when making meatloaf or burgers. The oats absorbed flavor, added texture, and helped the meat mixture hold together. If seasoned thoroughly with onions, garlic, or tomato sauce, it was nearly impossible to tell there was less meat. A bolder tip was using peanut butter. A few spoonfuls of peanut butter made the meat mixture stickier and easier to shape. It also added fat to retain moisture and provided a subtle nutty flavor. This tip appeared in wartime cookbooks and was noted by housewives with comments like, "The children didn't notice," or "The husband approved." This was a way to make dinner richer and heartier without sacrificing quality. Powdered milk. In large families, fresh milk disappeared very quickly and was often an expensive item, putting great pressure on the grocery bill. This was an essential issue because milk was an important source of nutrition for children. The solution wasn't in luxury purchases, but in a modest metal container: powdered milk. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the silent hero of every pantry, a secret of thrift and survival. This trick was not optional, it was a practical strategy. Housewives would mix the powder with water and then blend it with whole fresh milk to increase the milk volume, essentially doubling the supply. This ensured that every child had milk to drink for breakfast and that every recipe had enough milk for batter. Although the milk might taste slightly different, in an era where a full pitcher of milk was more important than the flavor of the second pour, that minor difference was completely acceptable. Powdered milk provided absolute peace of mind. It had a longer shelf life and did not require refrigeration until midnight. Don't let these legacies be forgotten. If you are interested in this trip back in time, hit like and subscribe to Back to Yesterday so we can continue to discover and preserve other precious nostalgic stories. Thank yourself for valuing these memories with us.